On July 27, 1944, positioned near Saint-Delegast in Normandy, France, an 88mm projectile tore through the hull of a Sherman tank with a piercing metallic shriek that typically guaranteed the immediate demise of the 5 crew members inside. Watching through his optics, a gunner from the 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, waited for the inevitable eruption of flames to confirm the kill, signaling his driver to advance 20 meters to engage the next target. Yet to their bewilderment, the expected inferno never materialized. Instead, the Sherman's turret traversed toward them, its 76mm gun seeking vengeance against the stunned German crew. The German loader froze in confusion as he reached for another round. For that American tank should have been a burning coffin by now, a certainty reinforced by every training manual and combat experience from Russia to Africa. What the Panther crew witnessed that morning was a revolution in tank warfare that German forces had completely missed. The M4 76 W Sherman, equipped with a wet stowage system of double-walled bins filled with 38 gallons of fire suppressant liquid. This single modification, present in every Sherman produced after January 1944, had slashed the probability of fire after penetration from nearly 80% to just 10 or 15%. Across the Norman countryside that morning, the 2nd Armored Division was attacking with 104 of these improved Shermans, and not a single German intelligence report or briefing from the Waffen-SS had warned the crews that their primary tactical assumption was dangerously obsolete. This transformation had begun in the aftermath of the disaster at Kasserine Pass, Tunisia, on February 14, 1943, where American armor lay burning across the valley floor, turned into crematoriums by German 88mm guns. Of the 300 tanks engaged there, 183 were destroyed, most consumed by ammunition fires that killed entire crews in seconds. Detailed investigations by the British Operational Research Section and the U.S. Ordnance Department's Tank Automotive Center revealed a stark conclusion. Ammunition propellant, not gasoline, caused most fires, as the 70-plus rounds stored in open racks became instant incendiaries when struck by hot steel fragments. The solution emerged through iterative design, initially suggested by a DuPont chemical engineer in November 1943, evolving from an absurd proposal to flood the fighting compartment into an elegant system of liquid-filled, double-walled containers positioned in the hull floor. By December 1943, the Pressed Steel Car Company in Pennsylvania was retooling its assembly lines, and the first M4 76W rolled out on January 3, 1944, bearing the W designation for wet that few outside the factory understood. However, classified testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground validated the concept beyond expectations. While dry storage detonated in 73% of hits from captured German guns, wet storage burned in only 15% of cases, producing small puffs of smoke that were quickly extinguished by the spreading liquid. The modification was comprehensive, with each bin's concentric walls holding 10 rounds, surrounded by a specific chemical mixture, ultimately a solution called Ammudamp, which solved the problems of freezing and corrosion while maintaining fire suppression. The M4 75W and its 76mm counterparts carried their ammunition protected by over 36 gallons of this fluid, adding 900 pounds to the tank's weight, but dramatically improving survivability. By April 1944, 130 of these Shermans had arrived in England, though concerns about training and logistics delayed their deployment until after D-Day. These improved tanks finally saw combat during Operation Cobra, which commenced at 09:38 hours on July 25, 1944, following the heaviest aerial bombardment in tactical support history. As American armor from the 2nd and 3rd Armored Divisions surged through the gap at Saint-Lô, the devastated Panzer Division attempted to ambush them, only to face a confusing resilience where penetrated Shermans refused to burn. Unaware they were fighting the new wet stowage models, German gunners saw tanks they believed destroyed return to action within 48 hours, proving the ammunition protection had worked exactly as designed. German defensive strategies, predicated on outdated calculations of American armor attrition, collapsed when facing these protected vehicles, as Sherman tanks began surviving engagements at rates that completely defied enemy expectations. Consequently, German counterattacks that were launched under the assumption that they would meet weakened American spearheads instead collided with opposition that remained surprisingly lethal. At the heart of this tactical shift lay a feat of engineering that stands as a remarkable example of wartime innovation, fundamentally altering the survivability equation for tank crews. The protective system relied on precisely fabricated double-walled storage bins, featuring a 1.5-inch gap separating the inner and outer shells. Within these hollow spaces, the design called for approximately 0.5 gallons of fluid for every 10-round ammunition cell. Achieving this level of sophistication was no small feat, especially considering the development process was executed with a speed that was incredibly rapid by typical military standards. When the initial water-based prototypes were tested in October 1943, they validated the fundamental concept, but also exposed significant operational flaws. The water froze in cold climates, corroded the brass cartridge cases, and eventually became a breeding ground for bacteria in the stagnant tanks. Engineers attempted to address the temperature issue by adding ethylene glycol, but while this solved the freezing problem, it unfortunately accelerated the corrosion process. The definitive solution was a specialized mixture known as Ammudamp, a complex blend of ethyl sodium potassium phosphate combined with rust inhibitors and biocides. This formulation not only remained in liquid form down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, but it also halted bacterial growth and offered superior fire suppression capabilities compared to plain water. Maintenance was straightforward, requiring only an initial filling followed by routine level checks via dedicated inspection ports to ensure readiness. Ordnance Department records indicate that the system's actual performance on the battlefield far surpassed theoretical projections. Upon impact, if a shell fragment pierced the bin, the liquid would instantly flood the compartment and saturate the propellant before ignition could occur. Even in cases where a fire did start, the fluid prevented it from spreading to adjacent rounds, effectively turning what would have been a catastrophic total loss into a repairable vehicle with only minor damage. While these advancements were being implemented, German technical intelligence at the Kummersdorf Proving Ground was conducting an analysis of American armor based on critically obsolete data. Their evaluation relied on M4A1 specimens captured from the 1st Armored Division at Sidi Bouzid in Tunisia back in February 1943, long before wet stowage was introduced. These reports offered a meticulous breakdown of the Sherman, detailing everything from armor composition and engine performance to the fatal flaw of its ammunition storage configuration. Intelligence bulletins were widely distributed to Panzer units, featuring detailed diagrams that pinpointed the ammunition racks located in the sponsons above the tracks. This tactical advice became standard doctrine, with crews specifically trained to target these vulnerable areas for maximum destruction. From the gunnery schools of Putlos to Paderborn, every student was drilled to aim for the Sherman sponsons to ensure a guaranteed kill. Anti-tank units received range cards with these critical zones highlighted in red, embedding the tactics so deeply that crews refused to believe the evidence of their own eyes. When hits to the sponsons failed to ignite fires, German gunners assumed they had simply missed the ammunition, rather than suspecting a design change. This reliance on outdated intelligence proved catastrophic, as their comprehensive analysis was finalized at the exact moment American factories began rolling out the modified variants. Subsequent intelligence updates continued to cite the initial evaluation as the definitive guide, blinding the high command to the shifting reality. When frontline reports began describing the unusual survivability of American tanks, staff officers quickly dismissed them as mere exaggerations from troops suffering under the stress of combat. Meanwhile, the American industrial machine was executing a transformation in early 1944 that displayed a level of coordination unprecedented in the history of warfare. At the Fisher Tank Arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan, the facility transitioned from the M4A2 to the M4A3 and integrated complex modifications without ever halting the assembly line. Between February 1944 and March 1945, Fisher produced 3,071 M4 A375W tanks. This required a complete redesign of the hull floors to relocate the ammunition bins safely below the turret basket. The overhaul necessitated new stamping dies, modified welding jigs, and entirely revised assembly sequences. To provide access to the hull ammunition, the full rotating floor was replaced with a partial turret basket, a change that forced a redesign of the entire turret traverse mechanism. Consequently, hydraulic lines, electrical cables, and control linkages all had to be meticulously rerouted to navigate around the new storage configurations. In Pennsylvania, the Pressed Steel Car Company achieved similar industrial milestones, commencing production of the M4 A176W in January 1944. By July 1945, they had manufactured 3,426 units, successfully integrating the wet stowage system with the new 76mm gun. This larger weapon demanded extensive turret modifications, distinct ammunition types, and a careful rebalancing of the tank's weight distribution. By June 1944, American factories had fully switched over, producing exclusively wet stowage variants. This industrial transition was executed so seamlessly that German intelligence, still relying on the analysis of year-old captured specimens, remained completely oblivious to the fundamental shift in armor capability. As a result, the dense hedgerows of Normandy became the inadvertent proving ground where the effectiveness of these modifications was first demonstrated in combat. The bocage terrain forced engagements at close ranges where German guns could easily penetrate Sherman armor. Yet the permanent losses proved surprisingly recoverable. During Operation Cobra, maintenance battalions of the Third Army reported recovering and repairing 67% of all knocked-out Shermans. Roughly 70% of the tanks that would have been total write-offs due to fire in the era of dry storage were now returning to active service, thanks to the new protection. This invisible force multiplier confounded German strategic planning at every level, with commanders venting their frustration in war diaries about the seemingly inexhaustible American reserves. Although Panther tanks were achieving hits and penetrations, many failed to produce permanent kills. American maintenance units were retrieving tanks that German crews believed were destroyed, repairing them, and sending them back into the fray. The mathematical models used by the German staff to calculate enemy strength, which relied on permanent losses from ammunition fires, had become fundamentally useless. Spearheading the assault with approximately 200 improved Shermans, Major General Maurice Rose's 3rd Armored Division demonstrated the power of this resilience. In just 7 days of intense combat, the division fought dozens of engagements and advanced 100 miles, maintaining operational momentum despite facing counterattacks specifically designed to destroy them. The German response came in the form of Operation Lüttich, also known as the Mortain counteroffensive. Launched on August 7th, this desperate maneuver committed 4 Panzer divisions in an attempt to sever the American spearheads, unaware that the technical reality of the battlefield had already shifted decisively against them. The German operational plan was predicated on the dangerous assumption that American armored units would be critically exhausted and depleted following their rapid advance across France. Intelligence estimates severely miscalculated U.S. tank strength had merely 60% of its actual numbers, completely failing to account for the Shermans that had been recovered and restored to fighting condition thanks to the new modifications. At Mortain, the 30th Infantry Division, bolstered by tank battalions equipped with these modified Shermans, shattered the German offensive power. The 743rd Tank Battalion absorbed repeated, ferocious assaults by SS and Wehrmacht Panzer units, and despite suffering numerous penetrations, the battalion maintained its cohesion and combat effectiveness throughout the intense six-day battle. In September 1944, the Battle of Kasserine provided history with the clearest demonstration of this new tactical reality. When the 113th Panzer Brigade launched its assault on American positions on September 19th, they expected to achieve tactical surprise and annihilate American armor through the superiority of German gunnery. The initial German attack did achieve numerous hits on the Shermans of the 4th Armored Division, with Panthers and Panzer IVs reporting multiple penetrations at favorable ranges. Yet the American response completely defied their expectations. Instead of withdrawing with catastrophic losses, the 4th Armored Division counterattacked with unforeseen strength and aggression. The statistics tell the definitive story of this engagement. During the Kasserine battles, the 4th Armored Division suffered 151 Sherman casualties. Yet of these, only 41 were total write-offs. The remaining 110 tanks were repaired and returned to service, the majority within a single week. German intelligence, which counted all 151 hits as permanent losses, calculated that the division should have been rendered combat ineffective. Instead, it maintained its offensive operations without pause. Consequently, General Patton's initial skepticism regarding the 76mm Shermans completely reversed, leading the Third Army to accept only 76mm armed wet stowage variants, recognizing that improved firepower, combined with enhanced survivability, created a superior combat platform. As the autumn of 1944 progressed, the second generation of improved Shermans entered combat. The M4 A3E8, known as the Easy 8, incorporated crucial lessons learned, featuring an improved suspension, wider tracks for better mobility despite the added weight, and refined ammunition storage with superior crew access. These tanks began reaching frontline units in October 1944. Simultaneously, the specialized assault variant, the M4 A3E2 Jumbo, had incorporated wet stowage from its initial production run starting in June. With frontal armor reaching 4 inches and turret armor up to 6 inches, the Jumbo could absorb tremendous punishment. When this heavy armor was combined with ammunition protection, these tanks achieved survival rates that bewildered German observers. By November 1944, the First Army fielded 105 M4 A3E2s across various tank battalions, while the Third Army deployed 90 Jumbos across 6 battalions. These formidable tanks spearheaded assaults on fortified positions, shrugging off punishment that would have destroyed entire companies of earlier Sherman models. This resilience proved critical during Operation Watch on the Rhine, Germany's last desperate offensive in the West, which was launched on December 16, 1944, based on critically flawed intelligence regarding American capabilities. German planning relied on the assumption that American tank losses would follow the attrition patterns established in 1943. The success of the offensive depended entirely on the rapid destruction of American armored reserves, with planners calculating that concentrated panzer attacks would eliminate U.S. tank units piecemeal. These calculations, however, assumed the traditional vulnerability of the Sherman. When protected by wet stowage, the tanks survived at unexpected rates, causing the German operational timeline to collapse. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper, whose Kampfgruppe spearheaded the 1st SS Panzer Division's attack, encountered this hard reality near Stoumont on December 19th. On November 19th, Rivers' tank absorbed 2 direct hits that penetrated the hull but failed to ignite the ammunition. Despite his wounds, Rivers continued fighting, his crew surviving impacts that would have killed them all in earlier Sherman models. As 1945 began, German forces were capturing intact wet stowage Shermans with increasing frequency. Operation Nordwind resulted in the capture of numerous M4 A376W tanks from the 43rd Tank Battalion near Herlesheim. In January, German crews operated these captured vehicles for several days without ever recognizing the significance of the liquid-filled ammunition containers. By this stage of the war, the Waffenamt's technical intelligence branch had effectively ceased functioning. The few technical specialists still working were focused on desperate wonder weapon projects, rather than analyzing enemy equipment. Even if frontline troops had recognized the significance of the modification, no mechanism existed to process and disseminate this intelligence. The transformation was later documented by the U.S. Army's Operations Research Office in their post-war study ORO-T-1-17. It revealed that pre-modification Shermans burned in 60 to 80% of penetrating hits, whereas wet stowage variants burned in only 10 to 15% of cases. This reduction multiplied American armored effectiveness invisibly but profoundly. A tank battalion with 50 Shermans suffering 30 penetrating hits would have lost 18 to 24 tanks to fire with dry storage. With wet stowage, only 3 to 5 would burn, leaving 25 to 27 repairable. This meant the battalion maintained combat effectiveness instead of requiring complete reconstitution. Across the European theater, this mathematical advantage accumulated strategically. Conservative estimates suggest the modification prevented burning in at least 1,000 tanks, representing 5,000 trained crew members saved and dozens of battalions maintaining their ability to fight. German operational planning remained critically flawed because it consistently relied on obsolete data regarding the vulnerability of the Sherman tank. This systematic error, repeated across thousands of engagements, contributed directly to the ultimate German defeat, a fact confirmed by post-war interrogations and memoirs, which reveal a startling intelligence gap. Not a single German account from the war years acknowledges this modification. Even the renowned ace, Otto Carius, who chronicled his destruction of over 150 enemy tanks in Tigers in the Mud, never mentions any unusual fire resistance when engaging Shermans. Similarly, Ernst Bachmann's account of his famous stand contains no expression of surprise at the Sherman's ability to survive direct hits. This lack of recognition extends to the unit histories compiled by veteran associations of elite formations like the Panzer Lehr, the 2nd SS Panzer, and the 116th Panzer Division. Since these are private recollections among comrades rather than official histories subject to censorship, their silence confirms that the wet stowage intelligence failure represents one of the most absolute breakdowns in the history of modern warfare. A complex convergence of factors created this blind spot, beginning with the fact that German technical evaluations were based on Sherman specimens captured before the modification even existed. By the time wet stowage Shermans entered combat, German forces had shifted to defensive operations that offered limited opportunities for systematic technical intelligence collection, while organizational dysfunction prevented field observations from reaching analysts. Furthermore, the German intelligence apparatus was fractured among competing agencies, with poor information sharing, and severe resource constraints meant that captured vehicles were immediately pressed into service rather than being diverted for evaluation. Cultural factors also played a decisive role, as an entrenched overconfidence in German technical superiority diminished the perceived need for a detailed analysis of enemy equipment. The modification's invisibility proved to be its strongest asset. It did not alter the Sherman's appearance, required no new tactics, and gave no visual cue of its presence. Consequently, German intelligence officers scanning for dramatic changes missed the subtle but revolutionary engineering overhaul occurring inside American tanks. The story of wet stowage offers enduring lessons, reminding us that technical intelligence requires continuous updating, because the enemy studied yesterday is rarely the one faced today. It demonstrates that innovations need not be revolutionary to be decisive. Often, evolutionary improvements that solve specific problems prove far more valuable than dramatic redesigns. For military engineers, this modification exemplifies an effective design philosophy. Identify the specific problem, develop a practical solution, and implement it across production immediately, rather than waiting years for a perfect answer. Intelligence services can draw cautionary lessons from this history, specifically that the enemy capability which seems impossible is often the one that proves decisive in a conflict, where information is as vital as ammunition. This case proves that an intelligence failure can be just as deadly as a mechanical one, considering the Sherman tank wet stowage ammunition system reduced the probability of catastrophic fire by 75% and saved thousands of Allied lives. Yet the system's greatest success was arguably that it remained completely undetected by German forces throughout the crucial final year of World War II. From its introduction in January 1944 through the war's end in May 1945, every major American armored operation employed substantial numbers of improved Shermans. German forces encountered them from Operation Cobra through the Reich's final defense, capturing and operating hundreds without ever recognizing their fundamental improvement. While American engineers designed the system primarily to save lives rather than to deceive, its invisibility to German intelligence multiplied its effectiveness beyond calculation. This modification validated the American design philosophy, proving that practical solutions implemented quickly were superior to the German pursuit of technical perfection. History records wet stowage as a crucial technical improvement that helped win World War II, but it should be remembered as the modification that won by remaining hidden. Ultimately, victory was achieved through enemy ignorance as much as through American engineering, as German tank crews fought the wrong enemy with obsolete tactics based on faulty assumptions. The modification did not merely save American lives, it shortened the war by maintaining American armored strength at levels that accelerated the German defeat. In this hidden advantage, multiplied across 1,000 battles, we find one of the most remarkable yet unknown stories of the conflict. A simple modification that changed everything, while remaining invisible to those who most needed to see it.